Welcome to Leading Beyond Limits, the podcast where we explore the extraordinary journeys and insights of remarkable leaders who have pushed the boundaries of what's possible. Your host, Angel Radcliffe, who is a digital transformation leader, author, speaker, and financial educator, will lead each episode and dive deep into the stories, strategies, and philosophies that have empowered these exceptional individuals to lead, inspire, and achieve beyond the ordinary. We're about to embark on a journey of discovery and inspiration, and together, we'll learn what it takes to lead beyond limits. So grab your cape, or at least your favorite coffee mug, because we're about to unravel the extraordinary tales of trailblazers who've turned impossible into I'm possible. Let's get started.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Deep Dive.
It is so good to be back. The break was definitely needed, I think, for both of us. But, diving into these topics, it really is the highlight of my week. There's something about tearing into a complex idea that just, it wakes you up.
It absolutely does.
Yeah.
And look, before we even get into the weeds today, I just have to give a massive shout out and a thank you to Angel. We're getting the opportunity to cover this deep dive again, and we are looking specifically at the leadership micro scenarios. And honestly, this stuff is just gold.
It really is. And I'm glad you mentioned Angel right off the bat, because the way these scenarios are framed is so unique. It isn't just, here's a business problem, here's a spreadsheet solution. It's psychological. It's about the human operating system inside the context of leadership.
Right. So let's set the stage for everyone listening. We are looking at a specific high-stakes leadership micro scenario from the Leading Beyond Limits series. And the premise here is fascinating because these are not your standard business school case studies where everything is wrapped up in a nice little bow. The scenario defines these explicitly as gray area moments.
Which is where real leadership actually happens, right? This scenario tells us there is, and I'm quoting here, no easy answer, no textbook solution, and no room for hesitation.
That is a very specific, very intense kind of pressure. It's that moment where the manual ends and your judgment begins.
It is. And to kick this all off, I want to read the text that goes with the image for this scenario. It's a short sentence, but man, it just stops you cold. It says, "You aren't grinding, you're just making expensive mistakes."
Oof, that lands, doesn't it? It's almost offensive at first. I mean, you aren't grinding, you're just making expensive mistakes. So our mission today, and I want to be really clear about this up front, this is not going to be a list of productivity hacks. We are not going to tell you to download a meditation app or, buy a better mattress.
No, absolutely not. If it were that simple, nobody would struggle with it. The goal here is to bridge that gap the scenario talks about, the one between knowing you should rest and actually doing it. We need to unpack why that sentence about expensive mistakes is so hard for high performers to really accept.
Okay, so let's dive into part one, the illusion of the grind. And I want to challenge this right away because in our culture, grinding it's the badge of honor, it's the hashtag, it's the humble brag. Oh, I was up until 2 a.m. grinding on this deck. If I'm a leader, isn't grinding just part of the job? Isn't that how I show I care?
Well, that's the prevailing narrative, yes. But that's why this provocation is so subversive. It takes this cultural idol, the grind, and it doesn't just say stop it. It relabels it. It doesn't say you aren't grinding, you're tired. It says you are making expensive mistakes. It reframes the output of that exhaustion from effort to damage.
That's a key distinction. It shifts the whole metric from input, how hard I'm working, to output, the quality of what I'm actually producing. But let me play devil's advocate for a second. If I'm pushing through a launch and I'm exhausted, surely getting the work done is better than not doing it. Isn't movement better than standing still?
Is it, though? That's the illusion. The scenario argues that when you are in a state of depletion, you aren't just adding zero value, you are often creating negative value. You are breaking things, relationships, code, strategy, that will cost 10 times the amount of time and energy to fix later on.
So it's the difference between motion and actual progress.
Precisely. But here's the psychological trap, and I think this is what the scenario really wants us to grasp. Grinding feels effective.
Right, because you're suffering. If it hurts, it must be working. That old, no pain, no gain idea.
Exactly. There's a physiological sensation of effort. Your heart rate is up, you're caffeinated, you're stressing. That arousal actually mimics the feeling of productivity. It feels like work. Whereas thinking, pausing, reflecting, strategizing, that often feels like nothing. It feels invisible.
It feels like idleness. And in a corporate environment, idleness is the enemy.
Correct. So we have this thing called action bias. The brain prefers doing something, anything, over doing nothing, even if that something is counterproductive. When we are anxious or under pressure, we soothe that anxiety by moving. We check emails, we move cells around in a spreadsheet, we call a meeting we don't need.
That is terrifying when you apply it to leadership. You're saying we might actually destroy a project just because our brain wants to feel busy.
The scenario suggests exactly that. It challenges us to realize that hard work, when it's fueled by depletion, changes the very texture of your decisions. You aren't grinding toward a goal, you are grinding down your own cognitive gears.
Which leads us directly to this idea of the depleted leader. The text within the scenario, it refers to the strategic necessity of rest, and it puts it very bluntly. It says, a depleted leader is a dangerous one.
Dangerous. I love that they chose that word. Not ineffective, not cranky. Dangerous.
Why dangerous?
Okay.
That feels like a word you reserve for, I don't know, heavy machinery or explosives.
Because a leader is heavy machinery. When you are in a leadership position, your decisions have massive leverage. They affect capital, they affect strategy, they affect people's livelihoods. And if you are operating that machinery while your cognitive faculties are basically offline, you are a liability.
The scenario asks a really uncomfortable question here to really drive this home. It asks, when you're running on empty, which of your leadership defaults starts to show?
And this is where it gets really interesting for me, this idea of defaults.
Yeah, let's unpack that. Because we all like to think we are consistent, but the scenario is implying we have two operating modes, our Sunday morning best and our depleted zombie mode.
Exactly. When we are rested, we are operating from the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for logic, empathy, long-term planning. We are the leaders we want to be. But depletion strips away that layer of cognitive control. It reveals the machinery underneath. And the scenario explicitly mentions two common defaults, micromanaging and irritability.
Oh, the micromanaging one is a killer. And I think a lot of listeners will resonate with this, or maybe their teams will. Why does that happen? Why do we start gripping the wheel tighter when we're tired? You'd think if we were tired, we'd want to let go.
You would think, but it's actually a threat response. When the brain is depleted, it loses the capacity for complex, abstract thinking, which is what trust and delegation require. Trust is cognitively expensive. It requires you to simulate, I trust that this person will do X in the future. That takes brain power.
So when the battery is low, the brain just cuts the power to the trust department.
Basically. It retreats to what is concrete and what is controllable. I can't solve the 5-year strategy right now because my brain is fogged, but I can obsess over the font size on slide 4. I can control that.
Wow. So micromanagement isn't even necessarily about being a control freak. It's a symptom of cognitive fatigue. You're just hunting for a dopamine hit.
Yes, you are hunting for the dopamine of completion. Fixing a font gives you a tiny hit of, I did something. Solving a complex personnel issue doesn't. So you default to the small stuff, and you end up choking your team in the process.
That is a massive insight. You're trying to find something small enough to conquer because you can't handle the big stuff.
Exactly. You contract rather than expand. And the other, default irritability, is the same mechanism. Emotional regulation is a high-energy cognitive function. It takes fuel to not snap at someone who asks a question you think is stupid.
We've all been there. The filter just dissolves.
And when the tank is empty, the amygdala, the threat center, takes over. It's often called an amygdala hijack. You start seeing neutral questions as attacks. You see delays as personal insults.
That connects right back to the expensive mistakes idea. If your default is micromanaging, the expense is your team's autonomy and speed. If your default is irritability, the expense is psychological safety.
And the most dangerous part is that the leader often doesn't even see it happening. It's called cognitive tunneling. They focus so hard on the immediate task that they lose all peripheral vision. They think they are just holding high standards, but really they're just leaking their own exhaustion onto the team.
So, okay, we have this setup. We know grinding when we're depleted is bad. We know it makes us dangerous. We know it triggers these ugly defaults. So why don't we just stop?
The million-dollar question.
Which brings us to part 3, the difficulty of the pause. Because if it was as simple as I'm tired, I'll stop, we wouldn't need a leadership micro-scenario about it. We wouldn't need this deep dive.
No, we wouldn't. The scenario notes that this is rarely a problem of information. Leaders know about sleep hygiene. They've read the books. The struggle isn't intellectual. It's psychological.
It's the tension of the whole scenario. It describes these moments as having no room for hesitation. So choosing to pause feels like the ultimate hesitation. It feels like failure.
It feels like a violation of the role you're supposed to play. There is a deep-seated fear that if I am not visibly doing, then I am not leading. We often conflate activity with value. If I stop to think, or if I go home at 5 p.m. because I know I can't make a good decision, I fear I'll look like I'm quitting.
It's the fear of visibility or, lack of visibility. If I'm grinding, sending emails at midnight, everyone sees I'm committed. If I'm resting to preserve my judgment, nobody sees that. It just looks like absence.
And that requires a tremendous amount of confidence to weather. The scenario has this beautiful phrase, refining the decision-maker's edge. It frames rest not as the absence of work, but as the strategic preservation of judgment.
I love that image, the decision-maker's edge, like a blade.
Yes. Think of a chef. If a chef stops chopping to sharpen their knife, are they slacking off? Of course not. They are ensuring the next cut is clean. If you keep chopping with a dull blade, eventually you're just hacking at the food. You're working harder, sweating more, making a mess, but the result is garbage.
And in this analogy, the grind is just the hacking.
Precisely. And the pause is the sharpening. But, and here's the catch, sharpening doesn't look like chopping. To an outside observer, or even to your own anxious inner critic, sharpening looks like you've stopped working.
That is such a powerful reframing.
Yeah.
Leadership isn't a title you're given, it's the way you decide. That's another line from the scenario. So if leadership is about how you decide, then the condition of your decision-making instrument, your mind, is your primary asset.
And that asset is depreciating every single hour you push beyond your biological limit.
But let's talk about the risk aspect, though. Because stopping feels risky. You feel like you're losing momentum or that your competitor is going to get ahead while you sleep. I feel like that is the barrier for so many people. They think, I just can't afford to stop.
That's the paradox. We feel that stopping is the risk. But the scenario is trying to tell us that continuing is the real risk. The scenario mentions that leadership decisions are frequently made with partial clarity. You never have 100% of the data.
Right. If you had all the data, you wouldn't need a leader. You'd just need a calculator.
Exactly. So you are relying on intuition, on synthesis, on pattern recognition, on what we call executive function. Those are very high-level brain functions. And they're the first things to go when you're tired.
So when you push through, you're essentially gambling with the company's chips while you're drunk on fatigue.
That is a vivid way to put it, but
Yeah,
yes. You are making high-stakes bets with compromised faculties. You might get lucky once or twice, but the house always wins eventually.
This leads us perfectly into part 4, conviction in ambiguity. The scenario uses the phrase, the conviction of command, and this is where we move from theory to practice, from knowing to doing.
This is the crux of it, really. How do you actually do it? How do you stare dang that pressure and make that call?
The scenario talks about bridging this gap. We all know we should rest, but doing it in the heat of battle, that requires something else. It requires conviction. But conviction usually implies pushing forward, attacking the hill. How does conviction apply to stopping?
It requires self-trust. Think about the courage it takes to say, I am not going to send this email tonight. I am not going to make this call right now. I am going to step away, sleep, and look at this at 7 a.m.
In the moment, that feels like weakness.
Yeah.
It feels like you couldn't hack it.
But the scenario frames that decision, the decision to stop, as a high-stakes decision in itself. It is an act of command. You are commanding yourself. You are commanding your own biology and your own anxiety.
That's a huge shift. Instead of seeing rest as giving in to your body, you see it as taking charge of your performance.
It's moving from a passive state where the work drives you until you collapse to an active state where you decide when the work gets the best of you. You are regulating the machine instead of letting the machine run you into the ground.
I want to touch on the ambiguity part of this. The scenario says these are gray area moments. Why is ambiguity so draining? Why does that gray area make us want to grind?
Because the brain hates it. Evolutionarily, ambiguity signals danger. A rustle in the bushes. Is it a tiger or is it the wind? The brain wants to know now. To resolve that anxiety, the brain wants closure. It wants to do something, anything. Grinding satisfies that itch. It feels like we are fighting the ambiguity.
So sitting still on the ambiguity without trying to prematurely fix it with just busy work, that's actually a high-level leadership skill.
It is perhaps the ultimate skill. It's what the poet John Keats called negative capability, the ability to exist in uncertainties, mysteries, doubts, without any irritable reaching after fact and reason.
Irritable reaching, that sounds exactly like the default we were talking about earlier.
It is. The depleted leader reaches irritably for a solution, any solution, just to end the tension. The rested leader can hold that tension until the right solution emerges.
Which takes us right back to the defaults. If you can't hold that tension, you default to micromanaging. You try to control the uncontrollable.
Right, and that's why the scenario emphasizes the conviction of command. Conviction isn't just about yelling orders, it's about having the conviction that your judgment is valuable enough to protect.
Your judgment is valuable enough to protect. I think that might be the core of this whole scenario. If you treat yourself like a machine that just processes tasks, you don't need rest, you just need maintenance. But if you treat yourself as a strategic asset, then maintenance is completely non-negotiable.
And remember, the scenario explicitly states rest is strategic, depletion is a risk. It's not a wellness issue. It's a risk management issue.
I love how business-focused that is. It just takes the emotion out of it. You wouldn't run a factory machine at 150% capacity with no downtime because you know it would explode.
And yet, we do it to ourselves and we call it dedication. We wear the burnout like a medal, not realizing the medal actually says, I made expensive mistakes.
So as we start to wrap this up, I want to circle back to that image of the expensive mistake. We've unpacked the illusion of the grind, the danger of the depleted leader, and the sheer difficulty of hitting the brakes.
We have. And I think for you listening, the key takeaway here is really about redefining what work looks like in a leadership role.
The scenario reminds us that this is leading beyond limits. But paradoxically, leading beyond limits implies knowing exactly where your limits are.
That's the irony. To go beyond your limits, you must respect the biological limits of your own endurance. You can't lead beyond limits if you have collapsed at the border.
And we have to remember the context of these 52 weeks of high-stakes decisions. This isn't a one-off. Leadership is a marathon of sprints. If you burn out on week 3, you're not there for the decision in week 45.
That's the long game. And that's where the expensive nature of the mistake really compounds. It's not just the bad decision today, it's the cumulative loss of your capacity over time.
This has been such a refreshing look at something we usually just brush off as, being tired. It's so much deeper than that.
It really is. It's about the ethics of leadership.
Right.
Do you owe your team your exhaustion, or do you owe them your clarity?
That's the question. Do you owe them your exhaustion, or do you owe them your clarity? I think we all know the answer, but living it, that's the hard part.
The gap between knowing and doing.
Exactly. Now, before we sign off, I want to leave our listeners with a provocative thought. We talked about the defaults, micromanaging, irritability. We talked about the anxiety of just sitting still.
Yes, and I think there is a question every leader needs to ask themselves in those moments.
Here's the question I want you to mull over.
Yeah.
It's derived straight from these concepts we've discussed. The next time you feel that urge to grind harder, the next time you feel guilty for stopping, ask yourself this: are you driving the work forward, or are you just soothing your own anxiety about sitting still?
That is the mirror test, and it is not an easy one to pass.
No, it is not, but it's the necessary one.
And
we would love to hear how this scenario lands with you. As we mentioned, this is part of Angel's Leading Beyond Limits series. Go join the conversation on Angel's LinkedIn page. There is a whole community there dissecting these scenarios.
Don't just look for the right answer in the comments. Use it as a space for your own reflection.
Yes. Don't rush to fix your defaults immediately. Just notice them. That's step 1.
Quiet reflection is the first step toward the conviction of command.
Beautifully put. Thank you all for listening to this deep dive. We'll be back next time with another scenario. Until then, protect your judgment.
Thank you for tuning into another inspiring episode of Leading Beyond Limits. If you enjoyed today's conversation and want to hear more from our incredible guests, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review us on your favorite podcast platform. Your feedback means the world to us. And if you have a remarkable leader in mind who you'd like to hear on our show, or any questions and comments, feel free to reach out to us. You can find our contact information in the show notes. Remember, leadership knows no bounds, and with the right insights and determination, you too can lead beyond limits. Until next time, keep reaching for the stars and leading with purpose.
Hey y'all, it's Kelly Clarkson with Wayfair, where delivery and setup are as easy as a few taps on your phone. Picture this. You're relaxing in an old hammock, scrolling Wayfair's app when you spot it. A brand new patio set. Next thing you know, Wayfair delivers it right to your patio and sets it up. Oh, you need a new grill too? All right, Wayfair's got you covered. With Wayfair's room of choice delivery and fast expert setup on qualifying orders, life gets a little easier. Visit wayfair.com or the Wayfair app.
Wayfair, every style, every home.